Jason's log, supplemental, 9:35 p.m. I have to go to bed, but I wanted to make one more log entry because I talked to Dad, and I don't know what's going on. I asked him what was wrong. I said every time Spawn Year comes up, you get weird. And he said if you had to review all those terrible Spawn comics, you'd be weird too. I asked him if it was really that bad, and he was like, you can't imagine. So I asked him what the worst one was, the worst Spawn comic, and he couldn't tell me. He said over and over, and then said the one with the green something, and then he just didn't say anything. I was like, psychoplasm? Necroplasm? Spawn's eyes? He just looked at me with a totally blank face. Did he hit his head? Did he get amnesia? Why do I feel like I know more about Spawn than Dad right now? So I quit bothering him about it, and we went through all my candy. I gave him a couple pieces, a Snicker and a Twix or something, and he went crazy. He kept asking for candy, and he ate like 12 pieces before I told him I had to go to bed. You should have seen his face. It was like he'd never had candy before. So
Jason, are you about to go to bed? Like, what are you doing in here, man?
Not yet, Dad. I'm just making a video.
Ooh, a video? You know, I know a thing or two about that. What are you reviewing?
Nothing. It's just a blog.
Just a blog? Nah, you can't just blog. Videos are for reviewing.
No, not all of them.
Yeah, all of them.
Okay.
Jason, do you understand why reviewing is so important? Because people don't think about what they watch or read. They just like whatever they're told to like, and a lot of reviewers aren't reviewing things right. Which is why those of us that know what we're talking about, we gotta help people figure out the right way to think. See, we know what's good. We know what's smart. Now, I taught you what a good story looks like, right?
I guess so.
Well, see, so you have to review.
So I can tell other people what to think?
Yeah, of course. Exactly.
Because they won't think for themselves, so we have to do it for them?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Dad?
Yes, son?
How do I know if I'm right?
Oh, I'll tell you.
And you're always right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a right opinion and a wrong opinion?
Yeah.
And you're always right?
Look, son, it's all up here.
I thought you were thoughtful.
Well, yeah, that too. I am thoughtful. That's why I'm right.
Other people's opinions don't count?
Not if they're wrong.
Oh, okay. Well, good night, Dad.
Good night, son. Now you finish your video. Make sure you review something, okay? Then go to bed.
Okay. Did you get all that? He's never said that before. I mean, I'm not going to tell him this, but I don't think he's always right. Neither The Matrix or Field of Dreams is the best movie ever made. Dark Knight Rises is good. Power Rangers 2017 is... yeah, okay, that one's got some problems. But he's not talking like my dad. I hope Doomsman didn't do something to him again.
It's really too much, it's like total paranoia. Close your eyes, he'll be there all night. It's like to listen to really light, positive, uplifting music while I'm studying for these reviews. Good old Serge Tankian. I'm trying to listen to nothing but Batman stuff. I mean, it's not like Spawn Year, where that's all I have, that's all I'm allowed to have. Like, just whatever was already in my phone or my computer, I can listen to. But I'm just trying to keep in that headspace and keep motivated as if I were Batman. So, good old Arkham City soundtrack. The first thing we have here is issue 486 with a wacky character, wacky villain called Metalhead. I'm going to assume this is Metalhead's first appearance, as Batman does not recognize him, and I can't do any research on this because I don't have access to the internet, but I'm going to assume that if he does show up again, it's going to be in a joke kind of fashion. This villain is absolutely ridiculous, and he's not to be confused with the robot Ninja Turtle Metalhead, who is infinitely more interesting and somehow less silly than this. Writer Doug Mensch, art this time by Jim Aparo. Some just really lovely, moody, atmospheric stuff from Aparo. I found myself really missing him in the previous issues, or at least retroactively as I'm looking this, going, oh man, I sure wish that he had drawn all that Black Mask stuff. This is a little bit less rushed looking, less hurried, and this is just really wonderfully gothic. Black Mask got away last issue like the Joker in the parody of Jingle Bells, and he is somewhat surprisingly to me, Doug Mensch is continuing on that story where he's actually looking for Black Mask. He's not going to find him within these 2 issues, but we've got a wonderful sense of continuity here where we don't just skip some weeks and vaguely call back to that last story and say Batman is still in bad shape and really tired and really needs to go see a doctor but won't. All of that stuff, that is all still happening, but we are directly following up from the last story where Batman is more than hard on himself right now to a point of absolute absurdity. He's bleeding all over gargoyles. He is not going to get himself looked at all. He's going to refuse to eat or sleep or even get his broken nose fixed. Meanwhile, we have this ridiculous character, as I said, looking at the cover, called Metalhead. He's not called that because he's a robot or has any metal anywhere in his body, including his head, except that he's got like a spiky mask, and that's why he's Metalhead. And he has this insane ability that I can't begin to explain, where he has this big rope or cord that comes out of his head and has all these spikes in it, and he violently murders people by shooting that out of his head, almost like Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy. I can't tell, because this is in still images, whether it's like some kind of a weird mind link thing, or like we're just supposed to take this comic logic where he can just stand there, somehow the cord whips around and kills people really violently, or if he's actually whipping his head around, because that seems just absolutely ridiculous. There aren't any mirrors down here, really, so the only time I see myself is when I get in camera and I'm realizing that my hair is all messed up. I keep putting this Batman mask on and off, again, just trying to channel Batman and find my drive and determination, and I really need a comb. I don't have one of those either, so I might have to start using a Batarang or something. I don't know. This seems like the most impractical way to be an assassin. I'm actually not 100% sure what Metalhead even is, besides just a guy who wants to join Black Mask gang. His whole explanation for what he's doing is, I kid you not, well, Black Mask is looking for people who want to wear masks for his gang. I wear a mask, and so he's off looking for Black Mask. But again, I appreciate that we're following up that last story and that this is connected to what we were dealing with last time. It's just such a silly villain. And I'm of 2 minds about the wacky villains we have in this issue and the next one. This one just absurd. The next one's going to be real generic. Because on the one hand, these villains are really unmemorable, and I want to dock it for that. On the other hand, Batman is in such bad mental and physical shape that it is a good idea to see him bested by these kinds of villains that usually he would have no trouble dispatching and that he wouldn't think twice about, but they're getting the better of him here, and I suspect that's going to keep happening throughout as we get into Knightfall. So as I alluded to, Batman is, or Bruce Wayne sitting around without his mask, bleeding all over the place, his nose will not stop, he's drenched in blood, and Alfred gets really, really worried about him. He's like, you need to go fix your nose. And he's like, I'm fine. I'm not going to do that. I've got better things to do. And he's really just trying to find Black Mask, and there's no good reason that he can't get some rest and try to heal himself, except that he's just incredibly guilt-ridden, and whenever Batman gets like that, he refuses to take care of himself. So then we jump over to Tim Drake, who is bringing his father back and forth to Dr. Sandra Kinsolving. Is it Sandra or Chandra? And I guess it's Chandra Kinsolving. She's a psychiatrist who also uses kind of off the beaten path methods to try to heal people. She's not a faith healer, but she uses a lot of holistic type stuff. And we've immediately got a mirror for Batman in Tim Drake's dad. We've got two clear father figures. One who wants very badly to take care of himself. He's learning from some past mistakes, and I don't know what exactly his deal is because I've not read what's before this, but he wasn't taking care of himself and now is, and that is a far cry from where Batman is right now. Batman, who I do know will eventually go to Kinsolving himself. He's already at the end of these two issues talking about going to see a doctor, so he is improving at least in some way. He's gonna finally admit that he has a problem, and eventually I think he and Kinsolving even kindle a romance, which is what the Vicky Vale stuff from the last couple issues was establishing, that he is single and the love of his life is gone and he's depressed about that, but there is room in his life for love now. I didn't even notice this before. There's a reference to animated series Batman, which is really amusing. So you've got Harold, who is the mechanic that works on the Batmobile and helps out with a lot of the gadgetry and stuff, who apparently, this is a little silly, I don't know how I didn't notice this before. I read the line about his doing something with an animation program, but it's animated series Batman, so that's really fun. Alfred is, while Batman goes off once again on his own, looking for Black Mask, Alfred has this kind of existential, philosophical diatribe about the reason that people have a drive in the first place to do things. Very simply, bare bones, why do we even act? Why are human beings proactive at all? And it's he believes all about survival, and there's a conversation that he has with Robin, but a lot of these ideas are his. So he says, it's about self-preservation, and it's about our base instincts that go all the way back to what we used to have to do to survive, that in our modern, more civilized society we don't really have to do anymore, because we can just go out and go to a grocery store. We don't have to hunt our own food anymore. We don't have the hunter-gatherer thing, but those instincts are still in us. And that's a thing I've seen talked about a lot, of course, about our primal urges, like why we still are interested in violence at all, why people get off on watching horror films and action movies and things like that, but also why people like to say go out hunting even if they don't have to, and that sort of thing. But this is more about just why we engage in activity. This idea that if we are, independently wealthy, like Bruce Wayne is, and we don't actually really need to accomplish anything in order to survive, what is the point of that? And the place he gets to, because Robin says, well, are you suggesting that he's just obsessed, and that's why he is pushing himself so hard he can't help it? And every time Robin asks him a question like that, he says, well, that's too overly simplified. And the place where Alfred gets to is that perhaps Batman has been doing this for so long, he doesn't know how to stop. It's all he knows. It's his identity, going all the way back to that Azrael idea of you are Azrael because you do what Azrael does. Bruce Wayne is still Batman, even if he's not being Batman very well, because this is what Batman does. He goes and tries to stop the criminals at the expense of his own health. And it's not just about revenge, although that may be something of a component of it, but it's as much about, it's as much of an altruistic thing, where the original, deep-seated motivation is that he wants to make sure that what happened to him as a child doesn't happen to anyone else, but he's been doing that for so long that it's not just about that initial motivation anymore. It's this repetition thing. That's who he is. It's as simple as that's what Batman does. And I'm having a difficult time not finding a lot of parallels to this in my own life. Coming into this insane endeavor that I'm being kind of forced into, I wasn't sure if I want to keep reviewing anymore, and I find myself wondering, why exactly am I doing this? And perhaps it's just because I've done it for so long, it's what I know. I am Captain Logan because I review, and Bruce Wayne is Batman because he fights crime, because he investigates. So Batman, as they're talking about his drive and whether or not he's obsessed, he comes right out in his internal monologue, which I should say is in some places, I think, overwritten and kind of repetitious, but a lot of the writing is pretty good. He comes right out and says that he is obsessed. He's actually seeing things differently than Alfred and Robin are describing them. Like, his interpretation is a little bit different. As you can see, we're doing a lot of deconstructing of Batman throughout this, and we're going to hit on a lot of the major beats of some of the real classic modern Batman stories. This, of course, being one of those. So they continue to have this conversation. Everything I was talking about obsession specifically is where this is. Oh, and this is where that internal monologue is. Again, just really nice, moody storyboarding here. This is some really nice stuff to read around this time. If I had to do this, I'm glad that it's over Halloween. And then we're reminded, oh, that's right, as I'm getting really invested in the psychology of Batman, suddenly I gotta look at this really hokey villain again. Oh man, here comes Metalhead. And then this is a very silly internal monologue line. Batman's still got blood running down his face, and he tastes the blood and he says, "Metallic taste, appropriate." And I'm just completely taken out. The melodrama has gone a bit too far. So now we get some action. Thrilling, you be the judge. It's pretty routine, and he's gonna keep fighting Metalhead out in front of this tomb, and then he's getting his nose even more broken. And then we get a symbol that we're gonna start seeing throughout, which is the busted bat symbol. Batman is, as we go along, becoming broken, and he's even gonna say that he is broken in the next issue, even before Bane has broken his back. He is mentally broken before he's physically broken, and I think this ripped up bat symbol is actually a really important symbol, whether it's intended or not, although I suspect it must be, because we have an escalation of it in the next issue, where he is Batman because he does what Batman does, but he may not quite be Batman anymore because he's no longer accomplishing it, and he's falling apart, and perhaps perhaps he needs to stop for a while and re-find himself. So long story short, he's gonna beat up this metal-faced guy pretty deftly, and well, I say deftly, it takes longer than it should. Again, he's being almost bested by this guy. At least he doesn't straight up lose this time like he did to Black Mask, but Black Mask is more of a foil. This is such a cartoony panel when he gets hit in the head so hard he's basically seeing stars. Or maybe he's seeing shuriken, and he's just like, and it looks like a scene out of like the animated Tick or something. And Batman is still, really upset with himself because he's failed. He's still talking about that from that last issue. Like, okay, I took out, this idiot, but I am still, a total failure. And Robin is trying to get him to go into some kind of rehabilitation, and some of the dialogue here gets a little bit stilted. I feel like Mensch sometimes isn't totally sure how to write a young guy like Tim Drake. He says, "Alfred's right. You need some serious rehab, friend, and you didn't fail. maybe Black Mask isn't down, but you stopped him, and when he makes his next move, then we nail him, right? I don't know, just calling him friend like that seems a little stilted to me. I hate to not have historical perspective. Maybe it doesn't read as goofy in the early 90s, you know, in 92, 93, but I don't love the way he's talking sometimes. But I tend to agree with Robin that, well, he did stop Black Mask. It doesn't seem like a straight-up failure. And then we'll get into the next issue. So that is kind of one story by itself. And this is, of course, going to be related. We have basically two single standalone stories that get resolved pretty quickly, but are continuing to drive the overarching narrative forward. So we had Metalhead, and now we're going to get Headhunter. I don't know if that's intentional, something we're doing with heads, maybe because Black Mask, and then we have a guy with a mask going after Black Mask, and now we have an assassin guy who is a headhunter. Real on the nose name there, Mr. Assassin Guy. You can go be a headhunter. Like, look how, first of all, look at this cover. This is a really generic looking assassin guy. He looks, again, like he's out of a Spawn comic. And then that gun is just ridiculous. It's not quite as insane as the one that Laha had, but it's pretty silly. So Batman, again, we open right away with that ripped up bat symbol, which I think is important. And Batman is constantly just repeating himself, I'm fine, I'm fine. By the way, I'm looking at the title of this issue, A Box of Blood, and I forgot to, and that's kind of a silly melodramatic title, but I forgot to mention the one from last issue, which is even more so, which was Heavy Metalhead. It's a great play on words there, Doug Mensch. Sometimes I feel like there's this tongue-in-cheekness to some of this Batman stuff that's not quite landing. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. Like, I like how comic booky it is in a lot of places, and of course, you know, it is comics, and there is a certain degree of melodrama that you kind of expect and that is welcomed, but sometimes I think it borders on the wrong kind of absurd and on kind of goofy. It's a fine line, and it's up to everybody's individual interpretation, but sometimes that kind of thing, particularly some of the play on words and some of the really, you know, on-the-nose connections to the villain themes and stuff, gets a little over the top for my taste. So Batman is going to have a little bit of a character arc this issue. He's going to start by refusing to get any help, saying that he's totally fine, while his internal monologue is saying, is really bleak. It's really dire. He's like right at the front here. Too hurt for one and too tired for the other. He can neither sleep nor scream. Breathing is an effort. Dying almost an option. Crazy that he's already at this place. Issues before he's going to get his back broken by Bane. He wishes for a wind strong enough to blow them both away. With every step, he lifts the weight of the world. His body has become a stranger, detached from his mind and will, heavier, weaker, a magnet for muffling fog. And this is the idea that will permeate through this issue, this psychosomatic notion that the issue isn't actually that there's anything physically wrong with Batman, but that his mental state is affecting the physical to the point where it's messing up his body. Now, I do think that it's pretty ridiculous when he'll go to a doctor here in a minute. This doctor will say, well, there's actually nothing wrong with you physically. I would think he'd be like, well, here's all these shattered bones that you have, or evidence of bones that have been shattered. You've got a broken nose that you never fixed, but he doesn't say any of that. He's just like, well, you seem to need some kind of therapy. And it's amusing because we get to the end of this, and his advice is, go seek out a holistic healer, which is very, very early 90s. I don't think you would see this at all in anything at the present day. Not to say that even at least placebo effect, that kind of thing, doesn't isn't helpful to some people, but these issues seem to be treating it as almost gospel, that like holistic medicine is always helpful, and that acupuncture is really good, and there's a lot of studies that suggest that there's not a real clear indication of just it's inconclusive how helpful that stuff is, generally speaking. Individual basis, maybe different things against psychosomatic help different people. So going back a page, we've got this mob boss Morelli, who we're introduced to, and maybe he shows up in an earlier issue, I'm not sure, but just reading this in a vacuum, I found myself kind of lost for a minute, and that it turns out to be intentional. Where a little bit later, we're going to find out who this Morelli guy is and why he is trying to kill someone. So he is hiring this really genetic headhunter called Headhunter, who's got skulls on his face, to go kill someone. And I think we're supposed to believe that maybe it's Batman, but it turns out that it's actually Gordon, and Gordon put him away. And the whole idea is, while Batman is off being a vigilante, Gordon is involved with trying to stop crimes and trying to take down bad guys that Batman never even knows about. And I really like that angle, that like Gordon's off having his own adventures and we don't always know about them, and sometimes Batman is so oblivious to everybody else that in his mind it's only the cases that he works on that are even happening. So now we have a conversation with Bruce and Lucius Fox, going back and reminding us from a couple issues ago that Lucius got tortured by Black Mask, and just giving us a sense of the status quo now, that the arsons are over and that most of the businesses are past that now, and trusting Wayne Enterprises, and that won't keep happening, that they can stay open. So things are getting a little bit back to normal. Now we have this kind of cryptic end of a fight with Gordon and his wife, presumably still about what they were fighting about before, where she's upset that Gordon is relying so much on a vigilante who is trying to get justice his own way, taking the law into his own hands. But we don't actually know in this scene exactly what this fight is about, and we'll learn more about that a little bit later on the roof of police headquarters. And then Alfred is still continuing to, a lot of repetition in this issue, but I think effective repetition, continuing to implore Bruce to take care of himself. He just says, "I'm fine," over and over again. That's almost all he says to both Alfred and Robin. I guess I kind of suggested earlier that Bruce doesn't see a doctor until the end of the issue, but of course that actually happens toward the beginning. But throughout this, he's more and more realizing that he can't he can't do everything totally alone, that he's falling apart and he's in bad shape. And with his admitting that he has a problem now, Alfred says, I'm very worried, because if he's going that far, he must be in really bad shape. I love this shot of Batman in side profile. I kind of wish there wasn't so much text blocking it, and I almost even would love to see that as a full-page spread. Again, this is where some of that overwritten internal monologue comes in. He wants to rip off the smothering mantle, and run naked from this place of filth and darkness, out of these rat maze warrens, all the way to sunlit fields where lions lie down with lambs, where he can sleep without twitching, sleep in peace, to awaken without the heart-stopping start, or awaken not at all, never again. Like I said, really bleak internal monologue. I'm glad that we're getting into Batman's head as much as we are, but I think some of that could be cut down. And then Batman is going to be called to the top of police headquarters by Sarah Essen, who, by the way, I either misread or it was incorrect before, and I don't have time to go back to it, but I thought that Sarah and Jim weren't married yet. They were about to get married, but here they are married already. So that either happened like while Batman was going off to deal with to try to deal with Black Mask, or I misread a few issues ago. So anyway, Sarah reveals that the argument that she had with Jim indeed was about Batman, but she doesn't know who else to turn to, because Jim is acting kind of like Batman, too autonomously. He's going off on his own, and she's really worried that with this, it's not Moroni, Morelli guy, I think Morelli was his name, another mob boss with a really similar name to that, that he's gonna get himself hurt. And so he, even though she doesn't like or trust Batman because he's a vigilante, she begrudgingly goes to him because she doesn't have anyone else to turn to. So she has to admit that, just by definition, that sometimes Batman is necessary, even after she's telling him, you cause more problems than you solve. A lot of, you go after the crazy villains, they wouldn't even exist if it weren't for you. It's escalation, like Batman Begins talks about. And Dark Knight, they are coming out of the woodwork because you're here. If only you weren't here, this wouldn't be happening. And yet, I need you, Batman, to go off and help my husband. And she is so angry that she even has to deal with Batman, and that the world revolves around him the way it does. I love that action panel, by the way, at the bottom of this page. With Batman jumping away from police headquarters, wonderfully dynamic. This is my favorite color scheme for Batman. Jim Aparo is maybe my second or third favorite Batman artist from this period, but I love most of these guys that we're going to see through Knightfall. And I'm excited to look at their art. And then she's going to break the bat signal, which is really interesting because we're building up to Knightfall. And one of the big symbols that people associate a lot with Bane is the kind of classic, iconic moment of Bane breaking the bat signal. And we've already cracked it here, which I didn't realize. The way it shines in the sky, I don't think is exactly what that would look like, but I mean, you know, it's a comic book. But once again, we're escalating that symbol of the broken bat, as Batman is saying that he's broken, and he has no idea just how farther he has to fall. And then the rest of this issue, not especially interesting. Gordon is going to, I have to deal with this headhunter guy, and then Batman's going to show up and take care of him for him. And that's about it. It's fun that he gets to use an ejector seat. And so he's shooting at Batman, and Batman's throwing batarangs just to distract him, and then he's going to take him down. Again, maybe not as easily as he would if he was at 100%, but still pretty easily, and quite a bit easier even than Metalhead. Oh, Jim, yay, you're okay. I had to turn to, well, never mind. I'm not going to tell you about the Batman thing. Luckily, we're fine now. And then we have a little epilogue. I do like this. We have a little epilogue where she comes back and thanks Batman for helping out Gordon. I like that we just don't even talk about the elephant in the room, that she cracked the bat signal. How long, he wonders, before all the broken, brittle pieces are swept away. So how much longer can I even, hang in there? And I'm a little bit concerned as we're moving forward that this is going to get even more redundant, and that I'm going to find myself kind of wanting to gloss more and more over some of this internal monologue and this constant discussion about how much farther does Batman have to fall mentally before he hits rock bottom. When will he start doing a better job of taking care of himself? He is starting to a little bit here, but he is, spoiler alert, down the road going to push himself harder than he even has been here. But maybe he won't be quite as hard on himself in the sense that he's intentionally punishing himself, which he absolutely was doing last issue. These last two aren't quite as good as the issues that we handled in the previous hour, but the art is a lot better, so I appreciate that. Again, a lot of it is just not memorable villains and some repeated lines that we didn't really need, but maybe those villains need to be not that memorable in order to tell the story that we're telling here. I'm hoping, certainly, that I don't find myself in the same position that Batman is here, realizing that maybe I was broken before this whole thing even started. Once again, all I can do is just keep plowing forward and hoping that that is not the case. I can't at the moment take care of myself any better than Batman is, but I like to think that going through this whole thing is an attempt at saving my livelihood and not trying to punish myself. At the very least, there's not a whole lot of ways down here to give myself a bloody nose.